Hi, everyone. Welcome. I think we're going to get started. We can all get out of here on this beautiful fall day. Thank you for coming. I'm going to have the Vice President, Drianne Benner, introduce our guests. I'm Barbara Friedman, the President of the Orient Association. And welcome. There are a lot of other civic associations represented here today, which is great because this is a timely discussion about saltwater intrusion. And just so everyone knows, we are recording on Zoom, and hopefully we're going to be posting it on our website as well, the Zoom.
We'll start. And then Greg Nissen, who's the owner of Mermaid and Goldman Water, doing both filtration and water testing. Thank you so much.
I don't have a PhD. In fact, I'm not really sure why I'm here, but I appreciate it.
Greg knows the community in detail, household by household, and Greg will be able to talk about practical ways that we can address issues when we have them. So again, first we'll do Q&A after, I think. So don't you think we'll just wait till the end? Yeah. So we're going to go through Fred's slides and Greg's, and then we'll do questions at the end. Okay. So thanks very much for coming, and over to you, Fred.
Well, thanks for coming out on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I appreciate the invite from the Orient Civic Association, and basically what I'm going to do is give you a background. There's a current project going on. I work with the US Geological Survey. We currently have a cooperative program with New York State DEC, and that particular program is ongoing. So, and I'll go through some of that program, and I'll give you a little bit of background on the geology, just so we can understand the geology really kind of controls a lot of what's kind of going on in certain areas. And then we'll go into the saltwater, and we're currently we are drilling in Suffolk County. Suffolk County is our focus right now. We've already finished the western part of it. And if you Google Long Island Sustainability USGS, you'll get our webpage. The current report has been published for Western Long Island. That includes Kings, Queens, and stuff. Nassau. So I'll go through that in a minute. And again, it's a team approach. I'm giving the talk, but behind me, obviously, is a whole team of people that go out and actually collect the data. And I just wanted to give a shout out to those people. Jason Finkelstein he does a lot of GIS work and the mapping work with us. And Andrew Lang also is a geologist and does a lot of the field work. There we go. Okay, so the project is in two parts, really. There's a field mapping portion of it, which is what I'm involved in, and then there's a groundwater modeling portion. So the groundwater modeling takes a lot of that field data that we're collecting and analyzing and collects that and puts that into a groundwater flow model. And I'll talk a little bit at the very end about that, but that's what's going on right now. Great, okay. And the phases of the project was Western Long Island first. So Kings, Queens, and Nassau County were mapped first. So that was a framework. We had to come up with a new framework. I know it sounds silly. It's like, well, you've been studying this for a number of decades. USGS has been on Long Island for over 100 years studying groundwater and the geology, but how can it be different? And what it came down to is putting in our own wells, putting in new wells, and we're taking core samples from that and analyzing those cores and kind of getting a better, bigger picture as to what the details are. And we actually found a new aquifer. So that was kind of interesting as well. And I'll go through some of those details. far as saltwater goes and the community, really that was the really objective of the project, was to try to get a new framework, understand what the interface is, get a regional groundwater flow model. And with the model, you know, the data that we collect now or into the future will go into that model. The model can make predictions if it's an accurate model showing what's happening today. That's the whole point. We need to have data today and past data, and then we can make predictions about the future. That's when we can change like sea level changes or amount of pumpage that may go on, population changes, things like that. Okay. These are the locations of the wells that we've already put in. All the number ones are what was already drilled in Western Long Island, and that was part of that particular portion of the study. The number twos that you see here are what were completed for what we would call the phase two, the Suffolk County kind of approach of the project. So all of these boreholes go to bedrock. And why do we go to bedrock is because we need to know each of the layers. We need to know the properties of those layers. And we also need to study like what is the groundwater component in those studies and where is the salt water. So we have technology. I don't need to put in, let's say we have 5 aquifers in one location. I don't need to put in 5 different wells to monitor the salt water, and I'll show you the technology that we use to do that. So one borehole is much more efficient, much more cost effective in any event. So when we do our drilling, it's a mud rotary type operation, but it's a dirty operation, but it's the most efficient way to drill deeply and safely. And we have a federal program with a local driller on Long Island, so it was kind of nice to keep everything kind of in-house. And basically, this data we get core, and then at the end of the borehole, we'll do some geophysical measurements. We can send probes down the borehole, get measurements of what's there at the time, and then we case these wells with PVC plastic. And I'll show why we do that too. But we can then monitor, you can sample the well, but again, using geophysics, which really is just applying some different scientific approaches to the earth. And I'll show you what that can do as well. And what does that mean for Orient? Well, all of this data is going to go into the groundwater flow model, but also we're all monitoring, and I'll show you an example of one of the measurements that we did actually in Orient. So sometimes we can use technology that we don't need to have wells specific. Now the number 3 wells here are phase 3, which we're in right now. We have a few more dollars left. This project was funded by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, so that's a cooperative program, and they're funding the project into the future for monitoring. So any wells that we do, and what's the point of drilling a well if you're not going to go back and study it? So there is funding to actually go back and study these wells, monitor them. That data will go into the model. There's money for the model as well to continue to be a living, breathing model for the future. So the good news is, you know, it's not just going to be a study that gets packed up, put on a shelf, and that's the end of it. If there's specific issues, specific questions on certain areas, we can do more detailed modeling, and there'll be kind of funding to do that. And what I'm excited about this project is I've been with the USGS now for over 30 years. I've collected data, spot data. You know, a well goes in Long Beach. I'll go and log that well, and I'll collect data on it. It goes in a shelf someplace. We never had a regional study. So I've done studies on northern Nassau County. I mapped the aquifers there 20 some odd years ago, but we would measure other wells in Suffolk County. It would be this disconnected pieces of information. This project now is pulling all of that stuff together, and we're able to produce new data. So for a scientist, this is fantastic to be able to pull it together, but it does it for a reason. And it's going to be to help sustainability, you know, understand sustainability for Long Island. So that's really the whole point of what we do. You may or may not have seen this cartoon in a way, this cross section. It's a generalization, and believe me, it is. It's very general. But Nature's more complicated than this, but that's how we'll approach it. If we look at specifically like for Orient Point in the Orient community, the upper glacial aquifer is really the king. That's really where most of our drinking water would be coming from. In the private wells, irrigation wells, whatnot. It's the water table aquifer. It's an ice age deposit. I'll call it, we use the term Pleistocene. Geologists like to have specific terms. That's one of our terms. So when I say Pleistocene, just think of ice age, get the idea. Now, because of the glaciers that came through this area, they've done an amazing amount of changes. So we had older material here, right below the upper glacial aquifer, which is our water table aquifer. We have the Magathy aquifer. That's a Cretaceous age deposit. What does that mean in English? Right before the impact of the dinosaurs, that's the age of these layers. They're about 70 million years in age, roughly. So these deposits were laid down. The Magathy is the main producer for groundwater for everywhere else but the North Fork or some of the South Fork area. So it's a wonderful producer of groundwater. It's our main aquifer for Suffolk and Nassau County. Below that, we have the Raritan clay. That's another Cretaceous age deposit. I've mapped that from New Jersey all the way out to Nantucket. So it's a regional deposit that even extends off to the continental slope, to the shelf. It's a major confining unit of water in the Lloyd aquifer. That's the deepest aquifer. It's protected for future emergency or whatnot use, but right now it's a protected aquifer. No one can really get in there, except if you're a coastal community. That would be like in Nassau County, maybe isolated areas, but pretty much it's the northern shore of Nassau and the southern shore of Nassau. That would be, if they're impacted by geology and or saltwater and other things, they can go to this. But it's not immune to saltwater intrusion, and I'll show you some examples. And below that, we have the bedrock. Bedrock is a high-grade metamorphic rock. It's basically what Manhattan is built on, except here it's 1,000 feet below us. On this, if we go, if we went down to Fire Island Lighthouse, I would take you there. It's 2,000 feet. So it gets, as you go to Astoria, if you've ever been in that area, some of those parks, it's subcrops and outcrops right there too. So that gives you an idea, a little bit on the background of geology. I won't go through all these units, but if you notice, there's some other different names here. The Gardner's clay is a South Shore clay. It's a marine type of clay that's primarily a South Fork kind of thing and South Shore. The North Shore confining unit, I identified that 20 years ago in northern Nassau County, and USGS agreed that it should be a regional name. So I got to name that particular unit. It's kind of exciting, but the North Shore confining unit is really a glacial lake deposit. There were huge glacial lakes here, so the bulldozing that took place of the glaciers, they kind of stopped. And as they receded back and melted, again, climate change was going on constantly. So for geologists, we look at this in a more bigger term, but it infilled the Long Island Sound with a glacial lake. And I've seen core samples from that. You can actually pick out layers as it changes from spring and summer. Individual specific springs and summers. So it's kind of neat. Anyway. So that's a major confining unit. It's equivalent to that Raritan clay. And then we have the North Shore aquifer below that. But I'll show you some cross sections, and that's probably a little bit better. But again, it just to show you, this was done in 1990, this framework. So we're 35 years almost forward in time. That was the last real regional look at geology. What was the major problem? If you look carefully, though, you see on the North Shore, everything's gray. Well, it's not gray. It's actually a much more complicated unit. And we have to get a handle on that if we're going to map everything. So this is an idea. We're currently drilling in Flax Pond now in Stony Brook. That borehole completely changed the framework. It ends up, the glaciers had removed all of the Cretaceous deposits there. It's all Ice Age deposits, bedrock. And how deep is bedrock? 870 feet deep. So you never know what you get until you start looking. And that was never mapped before. So this project is kind of pushing the envelope and kind of expanding, hopefully, some of that science too. The better we get a handle on the geology, the better the model is. If you don't understand the geology, you can't generalize if it's just sitting on sand. What's the difference? What else can we do? Well, these lines are data that we looked at. This is a marine seismic reflection. We can, just like in a boat, when you have a depth finder and it tells you how deep it is to the subsurface, we use a different frequency. And the trick is, if you can go a little bit lower in the frequency, I can see into the formation. And what does that look like? I can take, this is data from Woods Hole that was done back in the 90s, but what does that look like? What do I do that for? Well, this is a cross section. What is that? It does it with using seismic reflection. So this is from this would be Connecticut, and this would be Long Island. So when you take the ferry across, you're actually going over these major terrains. So this is like the coarse grained material that we have on Long Island, but this is the glacial lake clay we were talking about. This is bedrock, and we know the velocity of sound in these materials, and it has a two-way travel time, so I can calculate depth. So I can put this into the model, and we did that actually for the study. So this is what these clay units look like. Someone had asked me about, well, is there clay on the North Shore, or how does that? That's part of it. This is a major deposit. We found buried valleys on the South Fork that were 500 feet below surface with this kind of material. So the glaciers they're doing an amazing amount of changes. We have to take that into account. Okay, we got the geology down, hopefully. I'll just show you some cross sections. So this is new. This will be in the report. This would be like Hampton Bays, and this is Riverhead. We're doing a saltwater intrusion study for the town of Riverhead as well. So saltwater intrusion is an issue in a lot of different communities. This is one of them. And these black lines are actually gamma logs. We actually measure the gamma radiation naturally background. And what happens is clay units are going to be gamma rich, so we can map the clays with that. But these red lines here are what we call EM conductivity. They're electromagnetic measurements that we can take. And that's why we use the PVC casing, and I'll talk about that. But all of the magathy, this was, I think, this was at Poquatuck Beach, I think, in Southampton. It's never been mapped that there was intrusion there before. But if you notice, the entire magathy is true. The other aquifer that we were able to name for this project is called the Upper Raritan Aquifer. So part of that clay unit that you saw in the cartoon is actually an aquifer that no one really recognized before because we weren't looking for it. But that's important, again, with the model. The Lloyd aquifer is also fully intruded at that location. So the Lloyd, eventually, as we go further offshore, is going to be intruded. And then we have some issues in the magathy here, and that's causing issues in the town of Riverhead as well. Going back to this, so basically, where we are now is here. And that little kind of dot there of white is basically the fresh water that's available. So you're surrounded by salt. Again, this is vertical exaggeration. I'm not trying to make that there, but realistically, it's a generalization, it's a cross section. But this would be where bedrock is below us in some places, and the saltwater intrusion itself, you can see as we go further westward, it dives down, and there's a reason for that. The fresh water is actually pushing and kind of maintaining an equilibrium in a way with the okay. This would be the South Fork, same kind of thing. I'll just keep going. I just wanted to show you this. This is a more detailed view of how that magathy interface, from Mattatuck works its way into Riverhead and then eventually stops. Well, nobody knew where it stopped. It wasn't supposed to be that far west, and we found it's a lot further west than had ever been mapped. Why? Because no one ever looked for it before, and this study was doing that. So what is fresh water and salt water? I'll just show you kind of what it looks like. You may have seen some of these kind of generalizations. This would be like equivalent to where we are, right? We're near the end of the North Fork, and we're surrounded by salt water. We obviously have it in the Peconic, we have it in the Sound, no surprise. But we have a freshwater bubble that we're sitting on. And that's what the drinking water is for Orient. You have a freshwater bubble. That's how we call it. How does that create this bubble? Why is there a bubble there in the first place? Well, if we look at salt water, it's much more dense than fresh water, so it's going to tend to go down. It's going to sink at the base of a system. But what we found, the Guyben-Hertzberg method, it's a bunch of scientists that had come up with these. They looked at the density differences between the waters, and they found that it's a 40-to-1 ratio, roughly. Again, that's a big caveat. If you noticed, this is assuming this is one big pile of sand. And I just showed you Long Island isn't a big pile of sand, so it gets complicated. But, so if I measure a well and I know that it's 10 feet above sea level, the water level in it is 10 feet of fresh water above sea level, I can predict with these equations that there would be 400 feet below sea level of fresh water. And that's why does the USGS measure wells? That's one of the reasons why. We're looking for these type of detail. Now, the other thing we have to be careful of, that's lateral intrusion. So intrusion can kind of come in from the sides, but it also can come up from below. And that's an issue that we have, some isolated wells. So if you have a pumping well and a monitoring well, and that's what we were talking about, trying to see if we can get more monitoring wells. If you have a monitoring well, you can see where that transition zone or that mixing zone, or where that interface is, and does it change? And you want to get early warning. It's once it hits the well, once it impacts the supply well or a private well, it's a big expense for the homeowner or for the municipality that you're trying to replace. So that's an upconing situation that happens. You get water that comes up. And what happens from that? Well, you get high chloride. So what we measure, scientists use chloride as our indicator. So that's the one go-to measurement I'll look for. What is the chloride concentration? Well, for upper glacial, it should be about 40 parts per million. We use milligrams per liter, but parts per million is fine. Now, freshwater drinking is 250. 250 parts per million is the cutoff. If your well is higher than that, it's not legal to drink that water. Plus, you probably start to taste it a little bit. When we go from there, it's called brackish water. So brackish goes all the way to 1,000. 1,000 parts per million is where the general scientific community calls the beginning of salt water. Long Island Sound, the Atlantic Ocean is about 20,000 parts per million. Seawater is about 20,000 parts per million of water. So there's quite a range from 1 to 20,000. But in reality, that's what we have to deal with. So we're mapping the interface at 1,000. So even though we may show it, 50 feet below the surface in an area, that's the 1,000. We still have to worry about 250. So there's a brackish zone that's tougher to exactly measure unless you use geophysics. I'll show you. Okay. So I won't go through this. Is not it really. I just want to show you what these look like. The amount of intrusion that's taken place in Western Long Island. So don't feel bad. A lot of places that have Long Island, this is a big issue on Long Island and other places. I won't go into it right now, but King's, the original wells that went in at the turn of the previous century actually invented saltwater intrusion. Nobody understood because groundwater was a new thing. Used to just have regular wells. Now they had pumping wells once they got electricity to do this. And they realized, unfortunately, that once salt water comes in, it destroys the aquifer. It's not going to be pushed back. It's really difficult. So that's the interface that we mapped in the shallow system, and this is what it is in the deep system. So basically, the deep Lloyd aquifer is almost fully intruded in most of Kings. But now this is becoming an issue for Long Beach and obviously the northern communities as well. Okay. What is borehole geophysics? Well, this was during the pandemic, so we had to, even though outside, it was at the time the understanding, well, you got to wear your mask. But overall, what we're seeing here is this is a drill rig. This is one of our drill rigs, and we're sending down a probe down the borehole, and I'm collecting measurements. What does that measurements do? Well, once the well is drilled, that's what the well looks like when we're finished. The site's restored, and there's just a cover there, and we can send down other probes. So this is an example of what that looks like. This is a gamma log, and these are electric logs. I won't go into all the details, but so if we have conductive clay, we can map that with this technology. But again, just to show you the difference. So this is fresh water and that's salt water. And we can use this EM technology. It's the same technology as your cell phone. When you put it down on a pad instead of plugging it in, it uses a process called induction. And we use the same technology to see through the casing. So even though I drill the well now, I can use this probe. It sends an electromagnetic field into the formation, and I can measure the salt water. So here's an example. This is the size of a screen zone or maybe an entire well. So by sampling a well, that's the standard way of looking at salt water. But we don't get enough information. I'd have to put in 10 different wells to get the same information that we can with the geophysics. So again, that sounds great, but what does that do for us? Well, we take a look in Great Neck. This is what a wedge of salt water looks like using the technology I just mentioned. Even though these are samples that were taken, we can actually delineate where the interface is. So these are public supply wells pulling in, lowering the water pressure, again, lowering that water level, and that's inducing Long Island Sound for water to enter the aquifer system. I'll just show you this quickly. So this is, I measured this in 1993, so I'm dating myself here. That's okay, I guess. 1993, we had a peak of about 4,000 parts per million of salt water. And I measured it again in 2019, and it was almost double. But again, you can see how much thicker it is as well. So same well, even though it has a very small screen zone, I was able to measure how thick the interface is. And that's the technology that we're using for Long Island. We can also do surface measurements. I've done this in Queens and other places. And all I'm doing with that is I'm just laying out a wire. So a lot of farmers let us go on their property. We put the wire out and we send out a signal into the earth and I get a signal back. And what does that get for me? Well, I can process that and I can get a model of the resistivity or conductivity. This is an example right here in Orient that we did a year or two ago. And I processed it just for today's talk. But this will be part of our report as well. So what am I looking at? What does that mean? Even though I don't have a well to measure it, we can measure it using the surface method. And what we found was this is where the 1,000 parts per million interface is located at that part of Orient. So in the center part of it where the water levels are highest, we're going to have much deeper to the interface. And as we go near the coast, the water levels will drop off, getting closer to sea level. And naturally, the salt will then, be much shallower. So anyway, so here's Orient. We got 2 to 4 feet above sea level. So, using that ratio, we're talking, at least in the center areas, anywhere between 80 to 160 feet to depth of salt water, depending also on geology. I'm kind of generalizing. But as we go further west, the water levels are higher. If you notice, the land mass is thicker. We get a lot more fresh water kind of riding on top of that system, and that's why it pushes it, further south, further down. I just move forward. This is what we put. This is one of our wells that we did in Poquatuck. So we did drill a borehole to bedrock there for the framework, but again, all of the Magathy Aquifer is completely intruded. This is the upper glacial. This is the North Shore confining unit, and then this is the Magathy Aquifer. This is rare and very thin here. That's a big problem, especially if the Lloyd is fresh or if you have a contaminant. There's not much protecting the 2 different aquifers. That's something new. We didn't know that before. And that's a big issue, by the way, like if you've ever heard of like the Bethpage plume in Nassau County. And that's where this was actually discovered originally. That's what led to some of this other. All right. Just to finish things up, all of this information I just showed you, the framework information, the saltwater interface information. They take a look, the modelers take a look at groundwater use. So in green, I think is Suffolk County. This is the amount of groundwater that's being utilized over time. More population, we're pulling out of the system. When it was a smaller population, it was less of an issue because you would pull water out from a small well, and then the septic system or cesspool would then recharge that back to the system. Basically, it would be a very small loss. But as population increases, kind of works against us. We get more contamination. We talk about nitrate and other issues. And then, what's the answer? Nassau County went with sewering as well, and that lowers the water level. So that kind of causes streams to dry up, and that could change some of the. So there's not a simple answer for every single place, but we've got to keep that in mind that that's part of the whole system. Anyway, all of this gets put together into a numerical groundwater model, and I won't go into all the specific details, but all of these parameters get put into these different squares, these cubes, in a way in the model, and the software, the ModFlow software, which USGS has developed, can predict. Once we can match what's happening today in the past, we can predict it to the future. If you can't match today, you can't make a prediction for the future. That's the whole thing, right? So that's what we do. We try to calibrate these models. I'm going to show you an example of some of the modeling that was done already for this area. So we take a look at A to A prime. So we're looking kind of from roughly, I guess, just past Mattatuck into Riverhead out to Orient. And the red is salinity. So no surprise, we have major salt water. We got some freshwater bubbles here. And it dives down as we go to the west, right? Just like I showed you before with some of the salt. And if you notice this, why is this blue? That's the Raritan clay. That's that clay unit. And what we found is that sea level has risen so fast during the Pleistocene. Right now, we're about 3 millimeters a year of sea level rise. That's kind of the average since the 1860s or so. But during the Pleistocene, once all that water was locked into ice, once that melted, we had almost 400 feet of sea level rise. So that's a major change. Well, the clay units are so tight; they don't allow water to flow in and out. They're still full of fresh water. So they're what we call those. They're out of equilibrium with the systems. It's going to take maybe thousands of years for them to become salt. Anyway. We'll take a look at C to C prime, just from north to south in a way. And again, here's that freshwater bubble that we just talked about. So the model is able to match what we're seeing, on our data. So going into the future, they'll be able to make more predictions, and you can change scenarios like how many more wells, how many more people are going to need this water, how much recharge is going on. And these are the two studies that we did. This is the modeling portion, and this is the framework portion. Those are online. Take a look at it. It'll give you an idea of what Suffolk County will have, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, depending how. It takes a while for our review process to go forward. So just to summarize things, we talked about the geology in Western Long Island, but specifically how we can use these EM methods at the surface or even in the borehole. The investment is now in the wells, but decades from now, I'm still measuring wells from the 90s. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. We can put these wells in, and then we'll be able to monitor them into the future. And we'll be able to tell the communities as almost like an early warning system, this outpost well here near the coast that's is getting salty. And it would give an idea, we maybe need to make some changes if it's a public supply or irrigation or anything else before the wells get impacted. And obviously with sea level rise that we're expecting with climate change into the future, that gets modeled into it as well as a scenario. What happens if, you know, how much water will we have? And that's all part of this particular model. So the phase 3 part of it is monitoring. I told you about that. So we'll be doing that going forward. And that's hopefully going to give a lot more confidence into how we manage the resource into the future. So with that, I guess we want to wait for questions after the next presentation. So anyway, thank you for staying awake. Hopefully I didn't put anyone to sleep today. There's that.
Now we have Greg.
Sorry, I'm telling Fred how much I just learned. It's that's fascinating. And thank you guys for coming and showing up today. Orient Civic's done an amazing job with taking water really seriously and doing their own research and bringing in their own subject matter experts to help focus the discussion. I think you really need to be proud of that. We won't specifically name a small island between the North and the South Fork. But there's different communities who are struggling with this in a very real way. And people talk about they're almost a battle of is it just a dichotomy? Is it private wells or is it Suffolk County Water Authority? Right? Suffolk County Water Authority does an amazing job, but there are downsides. Private wells are nearly free. You know, you pay for your electric and a pump now and again, and it goes on and on. The world's changing. I have to commend the Orient Association for hiring CDM Smith, and actually a lot of CDM Smith, their work was Fred's data put into a way that you could understand as a community and use that data to kind of focus where you might go in the future. And what an awesome thing it is to bring in professionals like CDM Smith to help guide that conversation. It's tough, and there's zoning implications, and there's density, and it all kind of dovetails together, and you want an organization to help guide that conversation. CDM Smith is one. When I own Mermaid Water Solutions and Golden Water Testing, and we run little, I'm going to call them micro systems. Schools, like we run Oyster Pond School, we run condominium complexes, those kind of things that have their own little micro system, right? We also do household filtration, all kinds of other stuff. Statistically speaking, I think about 1/3 of you are my customers if you live in Orient already. I just feel like you're really going about this in a smart way, and it's pretty cool to see. That's for Orient Civic. So here we go. So I'm going to talk. Fred was talking a lot about that very upper little lens. Remember that slide? I think that slide was most impactful for me. You see all of that water, but on top there's just, Fred used the word bubble a couple of times. That little bubble is all we got right now, both for on the North Fork and most of the South Fork. We're using that for private wells. We're using that for public water. Public water is well water, at least when you're talking about Eastern Suffolk. And so that little tiny lens is so important. And it's damn shallow. It's right here. So I'm going to go over a few basic things because these are conversations I have when I'm talking to customers. And I get a phone call and it says, they call the office and they start with, my water tastes funny. And show up to the house, and as I'm usually a new house, 9 times out of 10 it's a new homeowner, and as I'm walking to the front door, I'm wishing through sod that's floating, right? And the landscaping is all soaking wet. It's never the 40-year-old ranch house that has folks in their 60s. It's always a new house. And it's part of just an educational process that we can't pump to our heart's content. It is a limited resource. If you all have, most of you in Orient, you understand how your well works. That the slide on the left, there's a well casing that goes down. There's a screen that's only between, some of them are as shallow as 20 feet right here, down to about 60 or 80 feet in this area. You have that storage tank in the basement, and that's your infrastructure in your basement you need to take care of and watch out for. The actual well casing that goes down, Krieger well out here did 5-inch steel casings. Those are all in their final stages. Boy, did Krieger drill a ton of wells out here. Boy, do they work. Man, oh man. They're steel casing, and they're starting to cave in. And we're seeing more and more issues with those steel case wells. The more modern wells, it's a 4-inch casing. You all know where those are in your yard. Locate them now before 45 weeks when the pump dies. You call Gregor, Casola, Hennessy, somebody to come fix it. But those little stubs sticking out of the ground should be treated like gold in your yard, right? It should be about 18 inches above grade. It should have a cap on it. It should be all sealed. And beneath that is all the business end of the deal. There's all below the frost line, power goes down, and the pump is in the bottom of the casing. A bunch of homes still on Village Lane literally have an 1.25 inch piece of galvanized pipe driven into the ground with a post hole digger with a jet pump on the end of it. I can't believe how good some of the water is that comes out of those too. But they still work. So know a little bit about your house. Know where the pump is and the casing. Put a big rock in front of it so that neighbor who comes over to dinner in the dark doesn't drive over the damn wellhead. Understand those basic pieces of it. So Fred did an amazing talking about this, and this is something from a website that Florida uses. Be glad we don't live in Florida. But there's a vertical upcoming. So what happens in your own home? What happens in saltwater intrusion? How does it come about, right? You have a well point in that top little bubble that Fred was referring to. It's sitting maybe only a lens is only 10 or 15 thick of fresh water sitting there. It's relying on only sipping, right? Just sipping a little water at a time, 10 gallons, 20 gallons a minute, and it shuts off. And that kind of sipping off the top of that lens is what's kept everything stable, right? Those little point wells that everybody had back in the day, jet pump can only get 8-10 gallons of water out of the ground at a time, right? But you build a house that has 12 bathrooms and everybody wants to get in the shower at the same time, that's 60 gallons a minute. To give you some kind of perspective, a garden hose running, typical 5/8 garden hose from Ace Hardware running, it's about 500 gallons an hour. 500 gallons an hour. That's how much your whole house with a point well or a shallow well really shouldn't pump more than maybe 500 or 800 gallons a day. So when you see irrigation running and those kinds of waste, it's tricky, real tricky. It's just not, we were never meant to pump as much as we are. So we get this upconing, right? We get this upconing of salt water to that infiltrates the bottom of the stream. Well, oh yeah, here's it. Let's just skip through this one. So, well on the left, still in more inland, better groundwater. The well closer to the sea level there. Clearly in that brackish zone we were talking about, that 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per liter of salt. And you get the upconing. And if you're real lucky, shut all your water off, and you wait a few weeks, and it rains like hell, and neighbors use a lot of water, and they flush their toilet a lot, the upconing starts to drop back down. We found, this is definitely a guesstimate, you get about 80% function back if you haven't totally screwed it up, right? Totally screwing it up is you have a seaside home, the faucet breaks off the end of your dock where you have a fresh water line out to wash your boat, you go back to the city for 2 weeks, you come back, and a 1-inch line has been pumping on your well for 2 weeks. It's filling the bay. Last year I had 2 of those exact scenarios. Turn the water off to your dock when you're not there. Salt water, brass fittings, they just fall off, salt your well. So that's going to be really hard to recover from, right? Maybe getting a few trees and running your hose a little too long here and there, you can recover. If you really do mess up your well in a terrible way, you can get a well driller to literally go on that casing, try to pull the wellhead up a little bit. That's not me. Don't call me for that one. I'll tell you that you're screwed. I'll do the chloride test, and then I'll help you try to find somebody to help you fix it. But they'll get on the well casing, pull it up a little bit, get it literally feet. We're talking just feet out here into better water. And you might not get a second chance. Once you pull that up and you're only in 8 feet of water, sometimes they have to put a thing in it called a drawdown seal, because when the pump runs, it sucks the water out of the casing so fast. Whatever you do the second time, it's going to be a little more fragile than what you have the first time, right? It's precarious. So think about when you're my big, think about having a shut-off valve at the head of your dock. Think about when you for the bell and ruin their house at the same time, and the line breaks, and they come back to the house 2 weeks later, and there's water coming out of their basement windows because something froze, right? Turn the pump off when you're leaving. Turn the breaker off in the panel when you're leaving, right? Somebody should check your furnace. There's always furnaces that can make up water and all that. But generally speaking, irrigation is really critical to watch. I can't believe how many landscapers right now, how many new homes are buying $2,000 worth of trees. Watching on Shelter Island a project from Martyrs, and no idea how they're going to water this. Putting it in the ground, they clearly sold it. There's clearly a deadline, but it just hasn't rained. But I don't know what to say. Not a good situation. Even more so, so many folks don't drink their water anymore. A lot of times they can't tell that the water tasted funny. No return, all their grass will be dead, and their trees will be dead because they filled them with salt water. And you can't water your trees with salt water. So we were talking about this, Fred was talking about this. 250 milligrams per liter is the federal limit. It's also the state limit. Sorry, I'm walking around too much. 250 milligrams per liter is the state level. You can taste it at that. You do not want 250 milligrams of chloride in your water. You'll get a certificate of occupancy at 250. You won't want to drink it. About 150 is where, practically speaking, is where you want to be. We use, when I'm running around in my truck and I need to tell somebody if they're really screwed or not, we use a TDS meter. And it does not, it's not a direct measure of chloride. It's not a saltwater measurement. It's just an indicator tool that you can have if you're a landscaper or somebody in the glove compartment of your truck, because it also doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be calibrated all the time. It keeps its calibration pretty well. We use the Hatch kit, the Hawk kit, HACH, and we know a total dissolved solid if it's above 500. A bunch of my landscaper friends, I've given them this when they're doing these ridiculous plantings, and I say over 500 milligram, over 500 parts per million, call Nissen. So when they're watering, they can just take the cap, test it, and know what's going on. If it's 300, they're good, keep going. If it's over 500, time to get a laboratory test and see what's really going on. There's all kinds of field testing, probably USGS has good ones for salinity, I don't. And they need calibration all the time. So we use a TDS meter. You can get these on Amazon. Be real careful about the super cheap ones, the Hawk or Hatch, however you say it. I don't know. Everybody says it different. That's about $175 meter. It takes 2 AAAs, sits in your drawer. Awesome. Totally awesome. And that can be used as just a guideline thing. Every landscaper that's doing installation should have one in their glove box and just check. The last thing I was going to show you, I'm just going to go back. These are well completion reports. Just in case, so when you get a well put in, here's one that Casola did. Just about every house has one of these on them in the DEC database. You can see the casing, just on the, you can see it's a 4-inch diameter well, it's 47 feet deep. A little bit of information about the pump, but you can see they actually have to do a little schematic about the depth of water in the top of the screen. So you see how closely that exact example almost mimics what Fred was saying. It's just that top layer. Here's an older one that was done by Krieger. Sorry, I got a little cut off, but so that pump is sitting in 6 feet. Can't see in that one, but super small lens. The screen, the gravel pack in the bottom is it's just kissing the top of that water, and you're relying on that to come back in. So wrap up. Know where your well is. We're not talking about PFAS and other things today, but be really so careful about what you're putting on your lawn. Do not use, I'll get sued by Milorganite. Do not use, if your landscaper is using Milorganite, have them stop. It is full of PFAS. It's a product that comes off of, it's Milwaukee's sewer treatment plant. Didn't know what to do with their bio waste 30 years ago. They're still in business. It's sold at all of our local stores. It's full of heavy metals, nitrate, and to top it off, filled with PFAS because it's in our human stool. Don't use Milorganite, please. No, I probably can't. but if you Google it, I can't, but it's a fertilizer product. And right on the front of the bag, it says organic. It's so tempting. Oh my God. So know where your wellhead is. Look at your well storage tank in your basement. This has nothing to do with me. These are well driller things, but I guess I was the only one to show up today. Look at the well storage tank. Make sure your wellhead is in good shape. You can get, let's go back to the end, one's other side, sorry guys. Right, can you guys write that number down? For $150, you can get a water test from the Suffolk County Department of Health. 631-852-5810. You call them, old school. They send you an email form. You fill out some basic information. They come to your house. They send a person to your home. They give you a water test that would cost about $2,000 at a commercial laboratory for $150. Don't say Suffolk County never gave you nothing. Best deal in town. Our certificate of occupancy water test through Goldman Water, if you need it quick, is $1,700. So plan ahead and get it from the county. Seriously, it's a better test. It's unbelievable. It lists all kinds of contaminants, including chloride. But if someone in the neighborhood has a chloride issue, there is kind of this stigma about it. Very often, it doesn't affect neighbors. Orient Village is a little tight, but in more acre and 2 acre zoning, typically the upconing is contained to the property. So, and you can call a provider, you can call us, it remains in the vault. We come out, we do some water testing, and we try to get you on a pathway. We try to figure out where the leak was or what happened and get you to the right well driller, people that need help, or can help you. But it's nothing to be ashamed of, but we're going to keep that confidential until you can get it fixed. It's embarrassing enough, right? So, but you want to address it. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Questions. My first question. Oh, go to the mic. Sorry. Greg, about filtration, because I know that there are people in Orient who have more than 250 parts per liter of fluorides. Tell us what can be done if we have that situation.
The first thing we're always going to do is you can't filter traditionally salt water. A carbon filter doesn't take out chloride. It's the most difficult contaminant to deal with, which is why the USGS is on this. I mean, this is bigger than PFAS, is bigger than everything. PFAS comes out with a halfway decent carbon filter. I mean, it's a crisis unto itself, but saltwater intrusion is going to be, that's the concern. So if somebody needs just drinking water, there's point of use reverse osmosis units that are about $1,200 or $1,400 installed. Run it to your fridge, run it to a separate faucet. Water just for consumption. Those better quality reverse osmosis units can bring the chloride down as long as it's not above 12 or 1400. Then you need to go into a brackish water reverse osmosis with saltwater RO that would be on like a yacht. We more and more have been, we have very, very few customers in Orient and on Shelter Island that are using reverse osmosis to treat for chlorides. With education and with a good well driller, you can typically find good water. It's very rare that I have an RO deployed. It's funny, Shelter Island always believes they have a nitrate problem and a saltwater intrusion problem. It's hysterical because they really don't have either. They're gonna. It's inevitable for all of us, but it's not as pervasive as data actually says. And we've been getting people off reverse osmosis on Shelter Island by just doing some adjustments to the well and reconditioning their behavior.
I want to add also, as far as I know, the Suffolk County Department of Health Services tests are only $100.
Are they still $100? There's
I
big
think
rumors
so.
they were going up to $150.
Well, I had mine done in the spring. It was still $100.
$100.
But anyone who was in the survey area for PFAS had free testing, and you can continue to have free testing once a year. And I urge people to do that because there have been cases where they were under the maximum contamination limit the first time, but after retesting, they were over the. So more questions, some questions.
I've been looking to do what I call preventive maintenance on my 21-year-old well, which I put in. And so I think I'm probably going to replace the pump and maybe the pressure switch and all that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Hennessy. I've tried to reach him. Is he still in business?
Yeah, there's a lot of there's Brian Penna, North Shore Well, Tom Hennessy, Casola, and Gregor Well. I'm straight up, I work a lot with Tom Hennessy and I work a lot with Gregor. Those are kind of my go-to people for this.
Got it.
Try again.
Thank you.
It's tough because their phones, well drillers are in such short supply. Their voicemail box is filled with people with no water. So proactive approach with these guys is very tricky. I know, sorry.
This is a clarifying question for both of you. Did I hear you say that there is a direct correlation between saltwater intrusion and density and development?
Sounds like somebody with a PhD should answer that. Yeah.
That is yes.
Well, I would say I'll couch it this way. Saltwater intrusion, really, it can happen naturally, just because of, again, we mentioned we've had a drought. We had that incredible amount of rain, right, in the summer out of nowhere, and then it's been like California weather. No more. I'm an astronomer as well, so it's been fantastic, right? Every single night's clear. The problem is that's fantastic, but we see the impact. A lot more irrigation has to take place to maintain if it's a farmland or if it's a private location. And that puts stress on the system. But beyond that, even if it's just sipping off the water table. And that's another good point too I was going to make. In 30 years, I've never gotten a phone call, maybe one call in 30 years from a farmer that had an issue with salt. But most of the work is because of supply wells, like because they got to go deeper and they're in the confined system. They have to go in the confined, and they go, it's a different thing, but it doesn't matter. The point is that we just the drought that we have ongoing now is going to lower the water table, just part of the system. So everything is recharged by rainfall. If you don't get rainfall, it's going to naturally start to lower. And that alone will induce intrusion. Maybe a well near the coast was fantastic. With that lower, we talked about that 40-to-1 ratio. That's a dynamic change. Just a few feet difference can be a real impact. But yes, if development isn't carefully managed in certain locations, you have to know you can't just build a development anywhere. There has to be an environmental assessment that's done, and that's required now. everyone now is kind of tuned into the problems. I showed you what Kings and Queens County learned the hard way. Unfortunately, we're slow to learn these lessons, but we do eventually, and that's what's going on now. So what I'm saying is, yes, I think smart development, people have to live someplace, they have to have a home, but it has to be done in using some science at least to make that decision. And educated, yeah, that would be that.
Appropriately for our environment.
Exactly.
The planning, I think, that's the planning. It might not even be for.
And the other thing, just to make the point, in the water table aquifer system, it's a little bit more dynamic. It was a perfect point as far as things can return if there's enough pressure to push. In the confined system, it's over. And that's why you saw the interface in Kings and Queens. They stopped pumping 60 years ago. That interface is like, it goes from fresh to salt. It's still there. There's not enough to push it back out. So because of, again, we talk about geology, if certain areas have that clay unit, you may be semi-confined. It gets really, so it gets to be, it depends on where you are. It's the geology. You can't ignore that. And we have to know where to do this smart development.
Given that, was anybody from the town planning commission invited? Did they?
Yes, actually, we invited, they're probably listening.
This is just to follow up on water extract. Did you say that the agricultural use, sod, vineyards, et cetera, farms, their use doesn't affect the residential use because they're tapping into an aquifer below it?
No, what I'm trying to say is, like typical, just like a private well, most of the farms are going to be right at the water table. It doesn't pay. If they do have 200 feet of aquifer below that, they're not going to drill the 200 feet to get water that they need to irrigate. So they tend, maybe by accident, economics, they happen to be, as was described very well, they're sipping off that water table, that shallow zone. So the impacts are really local, very localized within the area. Yes, if you start building that out to 1,000 farms in one small area, that's a different impact. But generally, they're spread out. But all of that information is putting in. That's what I'm trying to say is that all that data goes into also the groundwater flow modeling, and then we can make predictions about the future. But generally, so a private well, an irrigation well. Now the irrigation wells. Let's say they're pumping at 500 gallons a minute. I'm just going to throw that out. Okay, so let's say if it's a water table well, what we call the cone of depression, and I don't want to get into a hydrology class here either. Nobody really cares. But the point though is the physics, the science of it is the water table will have a cone of depression that's localized around that well. I take the same well, I drill it down into, let's say, the Lloyd or into a confined aquifer. That cone of depression now spreads out maybe, half a mile away. And that's the dynamics that are going on. So supply wells, to be fair, they have to go a little bit deeper. They don't want to avoid any surface contaminants or anything else. But by doing that, they have to be really, really super careful. And that's why, we do work with different suppliers to monitor the interface.
Are farms like in California, are they monitored for the amount of volume they're allowed to take? It's not like that here, is it?
I mean, that's a DEC question. We're not regulators. I'm just,
No, I understand that.
I think
Just-
the DEC does,
yes.
for new wells, they.
No, they monitor. Right. They have. Most, just like in the completion report, that has to be followed through DEC. So all of that is being reported. Yeah.
Could you explain if there's a relationship between rising water tables in a community and saltwater intrusion? Like we have people who are cellars are getting flooded that didn't used to get flooded. And sometimes, running that water out just to clean out the cellar. And is that because of saltwater intrusion? Is that because of extra rain?
So that goes to the other part, we talked a little, we really didn't go into details on climate change or what is expected. Obviously, I just gave you the example of a little bit, not what you'd expect with with precipitation. So we had like inches and, a foot of rain within a 24-hour period, and it obviously devastated certain communities and had an impact even on regular homes. There's a lot of flooding that took place with that. But we normally don't have that kind of thing on Long Island because we don't get that intense type of precip. But so those are the changes that we're seeing here and there. And then we go to the droughts. But now you're talking about, in general, we're getting a bit more, again, we're going through different cycles. But if we're in a cycle of a lot more precipitation, that will raise the water table, which is fantastic for the saltwater problem, because we just talked about the more freshwater pressure we have, we're kind of keeping that saltwater at bay a bit more. The problem, though, is, like you mentioned, as that water table rises, it may intersect the basement. So we've got to manage different issues. Yes. So the mitigation for that would be to pump that water, and then typically it's pumped to waste, right? It's pumped out and then sometimes just onto the surface or down the, further on a piece of property or some kind of drainage system. So, but that's a localized impact. So it's helping the homeowner, but I wouldn't say that would be, if you had, again, you'd have to turn that into thousands of situations to have a real impact. So those are localized things, but salt water is, you could have that happening, having higher water levels like that. But as again, fantastic examples, if we irrigate our lawns, and that almost doubles, when you talk with the Suffolk County Water Authority and you look at some of their data, as soon as we get into that growing season, meaning, with lawns and whatnot, the demand just shoots up. And, how do you manage that? Everyone likes to have a nice green lawn. My sprinkler system, I think it broke down a couple of years ago. I just left it. You get to the point, but no, the point is exactly that. It's that if you multiply that impact, that's a big issue, and that's what happens. Everyone has them on timers, so that's a bigger issue, I think, for saltwater intrusion. Freshwater. Well, as long as we're not at this moment, but in what we're projecting into the future, what we're projecting for the future is as sea level rises, it's going to kind of push that water table up, right. That's not at the moment, but it's what we're projecting for the future. So what you're talking about is more local. It's more like a localized climate type of changes that are happening year to year or season to season. And if your water table happens to be just below the basement, and that happened, we've had droughts like in the 1960s, a whole bunch of schools were built, when we had big population. Well, we were in a drought for about 3 or 4 years. And if you look at the long-term monitoring of water levels, you see like in 1964, it just dove down, the water level, and then it came back. Well, what happened was now we're getting more precip, and those schools, we're getting phone calls, they're floating, they're drowning in water, the basements, because they were built. The same thing is happening in Brooklyn and Queens, where they built these different, communities or these apartment buildings. They were pumping at the time. They were drawing down the water table 20, 30 feet below what they're normally.
And now they're sewered.
And now they're not, Not only
sewer
that,
communities.
but they're running they're on water tunnel water now. So they're not pumping anymore. The stress is gone. What happened? It recharged, and now they're flooding out. So it's a complicated. Right now, I would say that's probably like a localized problem based on extra rainfall. So I would say now we're in a drought, quasi-drought officially, but we're definitely in a depletion now on precip. So we're seeing the water levels starting to decline, and that also impacts the streams, right? You'll see the streams start to, have a less of a flow.
But it is expected that sea level rise will cause salt water to come in from the shoreline and also from below.
Right.
Yeah, it does push the fresh water up.
Right, there's more, think of it as a balance, right? So we have fresh water balancing out salt water. If we didn't have any more precip at all, eventually the streams themselves, the discharge that takes place, if you ever go to the coast, you can kind of see fresh water discharging out. It's naturally going to, nature goes from a high potential to a low potential, from uphill to downhill. So it's going to flow out. If we didn't have any fresh water at all, any more recharge, if rain suddenly stopped, for whatever, I'm just throwing that as a hypothetical, yes, then the salt water would start to come in. And it's the same thing as if sea level rises, now you're increasing that pressure from the seawater. If that dynamic happens faster or it doesn't stay in balance, then it'll retreat that water table, that interface will now go further inland.
So there's a question on Zoom? Okay. Okay, well, let's take a couple of Zoom questions and we'll.
Had two questions come in off our Zoom chat. The first one, this may be for Greg. Question, why is irrigation allowed in residential areas when there's such an impact on aquifers? I live in Orient by the Sea community, and every recently new home built has an irrigation system running.
Okay, so I think an irrigation system used properly is again totally fine. If you want some drip irrigation or keep your bushes or maybe even a small area of your lawn, that's one thing. But come back to it's like, if you go on Suffolk County Water, they've done incredible research. The Water Authority has done amazing research on this. How little water we are actually drinking, and then you can add bathing in, but there is such a small fraction of the water we're paying for to be treated to potable levels that are getting flushed down our toilets and spread on our lawn. It's not my place to say what people want to do in their yard. I'm not sure folks are truly fully aware of that impact all the way around. I mean, the bag of Milorganite says organic, right? It's just a process of figuring this out. And Orient Civil y'all are starting to have those conversations. Critical.
All right, and one more question. Do local freshwater wetlands affect the water table and the freshwater wells?
Oh, your question.
Yeah, probably.
Freshwater.
Do freshwater wetlands affect the water table and freshwater wells?
They replenish the aquifer.
Well, a wetland generally is a discharge area. So
The freshwater.
Spring
wetland.
freshwater. We need more information to really answer that.
I'm just reading from it.
okay. Well, I mean, obviously, anything that's going to add to recharge is a plus, because we're putting stress on the system, even if it's spread out. So I would just say, yeah. I mean, we use recharge basins in a large part of Suffolk County and in Nassau County very effectively, where we take that extra runoff and it gets taken, instead of just on the side of the road, it's directed into a recharge area. And that helps as well. It increases a bit more of the recharge that we're looking for, that precip to get, because you pave the roads, you put concrete down, you build buildings, these are impervious surfaces that kind of impede recharge. So that's why we do that. So yeah, I would say anything that helps.
And you'll see even on new construction, they're requiring dry wells on your gutter leaders because they want to keep that water on your property. That's an added expense, but that localized impact, big difference long term.
Okay, one more question, or are we done?
Any
more?
lady in the back.
Was
She's
it-
been there
Oh,
forever.
she left, I think. Oh, well, sorry. Okay, Brianne has one more question. Wait, this is the last question.
Is for Fred, is how can we as a community, as communities, how can we participate in the monitoring process so that we can know what's going on year by year? What can we do?
Well, we're interested in some feedback as well. So we're always interested in getting more data to kind of fill in gaps and do the mapping. Part of that is getting access to farms or some open area. We may be interested in areas that we could maybe put in monitoring wells where we need, sometimes there may already be a 10-foot right of way, but the drill rig needs a bit more space, and find a property owner that's willing to, let them, whatever they do, they restore the site. But to get that permission can be difficult. You can't make a phone call and, hey, can I put a well on your property? And we need to have these in accessible areas that we can go back and do the monitoring. So, but yeah, any kind of feedback from the community, anyone that wants to like volunteer information or access is welcome. And
you guys coordinate that? Would Orient Civic take people's information?
Yeah, and we have some
Yeah.
other, we have a bunch of civics here, and yeah, we'd be.
And they could feed that.
And that's exactly what happened. We got access to one of the farms. I was at one of the. I live on the North Shore myself, so I come out here all the time. I love the North Shore, obviously, but we were at an art show, and the property owner had open fields. I said, "Oh yeah, I own those properties." I said, "Well, I talked what I was going to do, and we did that EM measurement on the property and got some interesting information." So we also did it at the Orient State Park as well. But the more information we get, the better our map is going to be, and the better your model is going to be, and that's going to give you much more accurate prediction. And that's one other thing I just wanted to mention is those models, that they can make accurate predictions for different scenarios into the future, and you can manage the resource better. And again, prevention is worth 10,000 pounds of cure, right? Because if we can get early warning with these wells, we're trying to use those taxpayer dollars to the most efficient we can, and putting those wells in is part of it, and monitoring them in the future. And this way, the community gets feedback. A lot of this data is available on our USGS web pages. You can look up, I think there's 1 or 2 wells in the community here that are monitored regularly. And some of them are on data loggers, so you can get almost like real-time measurements of what the elevation of that fresh water is doing. And that gives you an idea. If you see it starting to drop, just like was mentioned, it was very salient advice, cut back on the pumpage a little bit, watch it, just watch it. And right now we're kind of probably getting into that mode, where we just got to be a little bit more vigilant about the water level. So yeah, anytime, we work with public entities, towns like that, nonprofits. So we welcome that feedback. And that's why I'm here today, because I wanted to also hear from the community as far as, your concerns and interest. And just the fact that everyone's here today on a beautiful sunny afternoon tells me that, this is obviously an important issue for the town and for the area. And I appreciate everybody coming out.
But these folks are in this process of digesting the need. They're considering all that because they're on private well. They're trying to decide what some of their next steps are. So this group is really going to want to tie in. Do we have enough water on our peninsula? Outside water? How long is it going to last? I mean, this group definitely one that's going to want to know those answers. Probably have a lot of participants. ready to go here, because they're trying to make those decisions themselves. Great.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.